underway that we should wait for, or should we just start? Anyone knows that someone is...
I know Scott made an announcement, but I don't know who's in there, so...
Yeah, I went back and made another announcement, so I think we'll just start. Yeah. Scott, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. I want to just thank SADHU Govardhan to be here. He's a wonderful person, a wonderful soul, very conscious, aware, very helpful to not just the local community, but really the Caribbean community and beyond. He wrote a book called other110, Securing the Future of Our Food, that I highly recommend you check out. I believe you have it on sale as an ebook.
As an ebook.
Yes. And he has a beautiful organic fruit farm and bamboo farm nursery, nursery in Mayaguez, and beautiful roads that Yuri wants to have. So he's really contributing in many ways, and I hope that you take a lot out of this here to help yourselves here, but also when you go back to wherever you go, beyond. As what SADHU is talking about is obviously not just about the actual agriculture and farming or nursing of plants, but has many different layers that have very many things to do with everything else we've had here, and consciousness and awareness. So thank you so much. Enjoy.
The acoustics here are pretty good, so, but the closer you can sit in front, the easier. Well, I guess. Can you hear me when you're back? Yeah.
Okay.
It takes a little bit less energy if I don't have to raise my voice if I can speak normally.
Do you want me to turn off the air?
Whatever you usually do. I'm very happy to be here. Seeing before an Indian guru reminded me of I lived in India for 15 years. Studied Sanskrit for a long time. Brought back quite some memories. But I'm here to speak today about the future of our food. Most of us, most people in general, when we think about food, we don't think very far. Usually as far as to the next grocery store. So we go to the store, everything is clean, everything is organized. Not everything is labored. Certain things are labored. And certain things are labored in a way that are easy to understand, and others, you have to be a chemist to understand them. And there are many things that are not labored anymore because the consumer wouldn't feel comfortable. But generally speaking, we think that's it. Food, we go to the next grocery store, we buy what we need, we go home, and we eat it, and that's it. And that was the end of most of our mental journeys as far as food goes. But behind that grocery store that we go once a week or every other day, there's a raging war that the population in general, people in general are not aware of. That war is literally raging. It's a very intense war. And that war is about who controls food. The food industry is a very, very powerful industry. And the war is essentially fought between two parties. I didn't want to just brought back memories when you speak about war and parties. In India, much is based on the Bhagavad Gita, and Bhagavad Gita was spoken on a battlefield, and there were two armies, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, fighting. And those armies were measured, I think it was 11 and 7 Shaolins, which is so and so many millions of people. But the food war is a very uneven war in terms of the armies. On one side, you have the corporate food industry that is backed up by the government, especially the most powerful government we have is the US government on the planet, and legislators, various government agencies, and the food industry is increasingly controlled by the biotech industry. An industry that is devoted to not accepting nature as nature is, but to manipulate nature and to genetically modify whatever they possibly can. Their budget is as good as unlimited. It's not just in the old days when you would say millions, that was a lot. Today you say billions, same for people. You say trillions, nobody cares anymore. These are all huge figures. We know it's a lot. But really, if you scratch underneath the surface, it's not just that they have a lot of money, they have unlimited money. And they use it in order to control food. Now, when you look at food, food starts with a seed. Most food, not all food, but the vast majority of food starts with a seed. So the first war is fought about seed. I remember when I was speaking about food security and food sovereignty 20 years ago, the statistics. At that time, Monsanto owned about 5% of all the commercial seed supply globally. And the rest of the biotech industry, about 10%. When I talked about food security 10 years ago, Monsanto had already 10% of the global seed market, or owned it. And the remainder of the biotech industry was at about 20%. Today, Monsanto owns 20% of the global seed market, and the rest of the biotech industry owns 60% of the global commercial seed market. So one doesn't have to be good at math. If you think 10 years ahead, how much will they own? If you think 20 years ahead, how much will they own? And we can reverse the question, how much control will we have over anything food related? How much is it? And we know for certain that if nothing changes, we will have zero control. And that is exactly the plan of the food industry. That natural type of farming is eradicated, completely eliminated, gone. Food is primarily supposed to be produced in a lab. It's GMO food. That is the ultimate dream of the food industry. And that dream for them is becoming more and more reality. So that was one side of the battlefield, one of the armies. Now, let's look at the other side. Who is the other side? The ones that protect biodiversity, the ones that are devoted to promoting, living, securing biological diversity, sustainability, genetic diversity. I remember when I wrote my book about 10 years ago, I had to do a lot of research about Puerto Rico related to agriculture, agricultural history of Puerto Rico. And I mean, I knew the basic figures that we are importing 94% of our food here. And most of that comes from the US because there are trade embargoes. The island is not allowed to trade with whoever they want and whatever they want. They have to get it through the US. So I was asking, who has ever collected systematically germplasm, seeds of vegetables, of tropical crops, of herbs, of fruits, of grains? And I found that there was one person in the entire island that has worked for decades on preserving heirloom seeds. Seeds that were proven to be very prolific, viable, etc. here in tropical conditions. So a man who is still alive, his name is Luis Soto, lives in Kamui. Old man who has just dedicated himself to taking that upon his shoulders. So that was vegetables. One person in an entire country. At that time, the country still had 4 million people. Today, we have a mass exodus, and we're about, we're approaching 3 million. Then I was looking at other crops, herbs. You have culinary herbs, you have medicinal herbs. How much of the potential do we have in the island? The full potential would be all tropical herbs that exist on the planet. That's the full potential. Anything that can potentially grow in our microclimate and soil. The same goes for grains, the same goes for veggies, the same goes for fruits. Fruits was better than the other crops, comparatively. We have, there are more than 15,000 tropical fruits existing on the planet. I recently wrote a compendium about the 1,000 best fruits in the world. We had, when I came to the island, we had about 150 species in the island of fruit. When the Spaniards came to the island, there were 6 in the island, 6 different types of fruit. So there's a big dogma or misinformation about the history of agriculture in the Caribbean. People think this is, every tropical place must be, that is green and lush and must have an enormous amount of biological and genetic diversity. It's not true. It never had. Many of the fruits came in from sea travelers, and then eventually, turn of last century, the USDA started to bring in crops for experimentation. Most of these crops never really reached the people of Puerto Rico. The experiments took 80 years, and they were still the only ones who kept certain fruit species. Some of the best example would be pulasam, rambutan. Those are incredibly good fruits, extremely healthy, tasty, but they never got out to the public because they kept everything to themselves. And then the rest was done by private fruit collectors. I brought about 150, 200 species of fruits to the island here by myself over the last 17 years. And then we have, I was with herbs before, we have culinary herbs and medicinal herbs. The potential, we have about 1 or 2 or 3% of all the herbs that exist in tropical regions here in the island. So we're missing about 97, 98% of all that exists. The vegetables, we're missing about the same amount, same percentage, 95, 96, 97% of the potential that is out there. We don't have it. With fruits, at least we have about 500 species now out of the 15,000, which is about 3%, 4%. But we do have high quality fruits. So we have about 20% of the most important ones. Grains, less than 0.5%. To grow grains in the tropics is challenging. There are not too many. options, and we don't have them here. So the ones that work on preserving germplasm, on preserving seeds that can feed a nation, those people don't exist here. There are no organizations that really do that systematically. We do have organizations here that are organic organizations like Boricua or others, but they never systematically studied tropical crops. So we have, particularly here in Puerto Rico, a very precarious and very dangerous situation. So we depend on the food that comes in, but if we look at the food that comes in, all food today is treated in one way or the other, or altered. And that is not a process that happens by chance, but happens by design. Those who control the food industry use food as a weapon against the human body, and also a weapon against consciousness. Why is the government so excited to promote the fast food industry? Because it destroys consciousness. Why is there so much promotion about meat, for example? Meat eating, historically speaking, was not really on the map until after the Second World War, when it became mandatory for everyone. It became a standard in everyone's diet. The reason for that was it wasn't there for thousands of years. People, even in regions where meat eating was somewhat of a tradition, it was done once a month, maybe once a week, in extremely cold regions, etc. And then you have regions like in Asia and India where you have thousands of years of vegetarian tradition. But the meat industry, or the food industry, wanted to break that paradigm of food that is healthy and that benefits people's bodies and consciousness. So that's why they turned up a propaganda machine to normalize the eating of meat. And their main reason of doing so was to desensitize people, to desensitize consciousness. Because meat, it's mass murder. It's automated mass murder. So naturally, if this is what we eat on a daily basis, we eat corpse, we eat something that was slaughtered, that was murdered, it will affect consciousness. There's no way around it. Food affects consciousness. So the meat industry, the food industry, meat industry, they understand that. And that is a deliberate way of action. And that generally is not so well seen or understood because people usually don't look at who controls the food industry. Who is the food industry? Ultimately, there are always people behind it. We know corporations sometimes, we know a corporate name. But who owns the corporations? Who controls the corporations? And then who owns or controls the legislators, or those who regulate the food industry, the FDA? And once one understands that, one gets closer to the real issue. The FDA was funded and influenced from day one from certain individuals. Rockefeller is one of the main guys out there that controlled government agencies from the very beginning. Rockefeller's claim to fame was through the oil industry, and he was the first billionaire in the States, and immediately began to infiltrate the educational system, the school system, and the government in order to push his own agenda. And if you look at the agenda of these people,
They are what is generally known as eugenicists, people who are very concerned to eliminate unwanted population. And in their eyes, in the eyes of the elite, the vast majority of the population is unwanted. The vast majority, all of us, are unwanted. And you have, for example, there's so many eugenicists out there today that it would be a very, very, very long list. But one famous one that influenced a lot is the father of Bill Gates, William H. Gates, who had he started a society of controlled parenthood. And if you read the language, it was that humans are reckless breeders. They are weeds. And he hears this today in speeches. Netanyahu, when he goes into Gaza and when they bomb Gaza, he says it's like weeding or cutting the lawn. That's what they call it. Cutting the lawn. You have to cut the grass regularly because it will grow back. So we have many leaders today in society that are very overt or covert eugenicists. They love to kill. They take pleasure in that. Killing as well as torture. You look at the last American presidents, they're all sold out to torturing and murdering, killing as many as they can. It's part of their agenda. Bush family, famous for it. Clinton family, famous for it. Obama became famous for it. Of course, now we have an exception. We have Trump. He loves everyone. Except the Mexicans and the Muslims, and everyone from the Middle East. But it's a tradition that the leaders in society, they're very well aware of the power of food. Therefore, they control it. And food was always tampered with and altered, especially, the more society changed from an agrarian-based society into what we have today, that the vast majority lives in cities. In the past, everything was you go out in the garden, you harvest, and from the garden to your mouth, basically. But as cities grew, this tradition changed. So they started to pasteurize. And if you look at the process of pasteurization, in the beginning, they thought, well, why do we do it? To kill certain pathogens or to kill certain bacteria to make it more safe. Today, we do know that this process had the opposite effect. It never had that effect that was promised, that people were told. It destroys, the first thing that it does, pasteurization, is it destroys enzymes. It destroys or diminishes vitamins. It also destroys beneficial bacteria. So, but in the beginning, Western civilization is a lot about, we just do whatever we want to do. It's very experimental, but it's not backed up by knowledge. They have no idea what it means to drink a substance that is pasteurized. Homogenized, same thing. If you homogenize something, particularly that's the dairy industry has to deal with that. If you homogenize a milk product, what happens is that fat molecules, they're broken down into very tiny units. And what they do is they bypass the natural digestive system and they go directly into the bloodstream. And what happens when they're in the bloodstream? They travel and they attach, for example, to arterial walls, and the body has to react to that, And then he has to produce some substance to balance that out. It's an imbalance in the body. It's something that is unnatural to the body. And then 40% of our food today is irradiated. Same purpose always, to denature food, the official propaganda is always to make it more safe. The reality is to completely denature it, so that there's no power left in food, there's no healing power, no nutritional power, it's gone, it's destroyed, 40%. Irradiation is an amazing process. Most people are not aware of what takes place in that process. What does it mean if something is irradiated? If we take an X-ray, we know the strength or the power of the radiation of an X-ray. And if you multiply that, who would guess a number? How much we have to multiply it by that we have the right number that food is irradiated with? Anyone wants to give it a guess?
40.
40 times.
1,000 times.
1,000 times. Getting harder. 30 million times. 30 million times. This creates what is known as radiolytics. Radiolytics are very similar, like, I don't know, maybe too complicated or too technical, but like free radicals. Essentially, substances that the body cannot process, substances that are carcinogenic, that are highly dangerous for the human body. I spoke recently to a friend of mine. He owns the biggest sprouting company in the US. Wow. So, he tells me now, the US has about 50 million people or so. And there were 4 or 5 cases in the US of people who claim that they got some sort of disease by eating sprouts. And the FDA said, this is exactly what we were waiting for, this type of information. We will come to the rescue. And now there's a new regulation that is followed in some parts of the US and less in others, that you have to apply chlorine solutions to every organic food, to anything that is sprouted, that travels commercially. He was forced to do it. Now, if you take, does anyone know the ppm in a swimming pool of chlorine? It's between parts per million. It's between 1 and 3 parts per million. Now, the chlorine solution used for sprouts and seeds, would anyone want to guess how much it is?
I'm too scared.
That's a good answer. It is 20,000.
Oh my God.
So it is 20,000 times stronger than the chlorine you have in the pool.
Which is really strong already.
Yes.
Which is fairly, it's between 1 and 3%. 3% is strong, 1% is so. Chlorine is highly dangerous, environmentally speaking, yes. It's devastating. So, you know, and Bob, you know, like many in the alternative food industry, he grew up, it's hippie culture, late 60s. Oh, we're already at 35 minutes?
You got 5 more minutes.
It's difficult for me once I get into these issues.
10 minutes is fine too.
I can go for hours or days, but I'll try to be efficient and fast here. So, you know, he thought that he could maintain a purity of food, the food that, you know, that was an ideology for him to produce healthy food for people that benefits them. And he thinks, that he can fight the FDA. And I told him, Bob, you've been around for such a long time. Do you really think you can fight them? We have lost every single battle against them for so and so many decades, and we'll continue to lose. And he was arguing for a while, and at one point he sort of admitted that, yeah, I've become a corporation, essentially. But I think this is reality today, that people start out with all sorts of ideals and this and that, but then they're forced over time to make one compromise after the other, to surrender to one rule regulation after the other. And I think Dana, you mentioned that some people, they try to reform a school, whereas your approach was to have an alternate system. Instead of fixing a system, trying to fix a system and have an alternate system, you can start out fresh and clean. But yeah, that's the name of the game, that you cannot convince the FDA that you don't have to do that, because there's an agenda behind it. They're getting paid to do that. We had a case recently where a few people in the island wanted to spray the entire island with a highly toxic insecticide. And I was part of the group fighting it, and we somehow succeeded, but they were ready to spray an entire island. Why? Because they get paid for it. That's just the reality. So, how do we secure the future of our food? Is the
Thank you,
subject.
SADHU. I just want to say thank you. I officially want to thank you for the work you did with that. Because thanks to SADHU and other people.
Oh, that was an intense battle, actually, yes.
Thank you very much.
So how do we secure the future of our food? The first answer is that if we do nothing, we know exactly where it will lead. There will be no natural food left on the planet, because that is the agenda, that is the plan, that's the master plan. So we cannot just look and be passive bystanders and think, well, food comes from the grocery store, the supermarket. No, it does not. And the next thing is, yeah, the farmers will do it. Who? Which farmers? I mean, living here in the island, we have 18,000 farms left in the island. We have about 30,000 people left in the island that are directly or indirectly related to farming, but most of the farming done here has nothing to do with food. The most popular crop here is coffee, which is, I'm a hardliner, unfortunately, in some ways that even alternative people have a hard time with. It's a drug. It's not food. Coffee is neither healthy, or it's a stimulant, it's a drug. However one feels about coffee, but the fact is, we don't produce food here in the island. There's only one crop that we are self-sufficient with in the island. Bananas. That's it. No other second crop. So it's a very precarious situation. We cannot leave it up to someone, the farmer, that doesn't exist. And frankly, most of the alternative farmers here have no interest in tropical food crops. As shocking as it may sound, they prefer to imitate what is grown in northern climates, in temperate climate regions. They want to grow broccoli, they want to grow carrots, they want to grow beets. Anything that is grown in the States, they want to grow. Even our alternative farmers that are all, we are organic farm, so-and-so, organic farm, this and that. They don't grow tropical food crops. They have no interest in tropical greens. It's shocking, but it is the truth. So, if we really do want to have any say in the future of food, we have to become active. And depending on where we live, here is a tropical island, we need tropical food crops. So we have to know them, and we have to get them, and we have to plant them. In education is such a big issue. We have schools, and it was a nice anecdote. I just remember when I was a kid, when I went to India, I was 19, and I was in India, and I was just maybe long hair, just traveling around and checking out, the spiritual side of India. And one day I was in a courtyard of a temple, and there was a guru at the Yasasana, the asana, an elevated seat. And he spoke, and it was in Hindi, and at that time, I studied Sanskrit later for many years, but I didn't know anything, so I didn't understand a single word, nothing. And after the lecture was over, there were hundreds of people there, and they were all, really focused on that speech that guru gave. And then, so I was in the back of the courtyard. I just wanted to be an observer, nothing more. And then it was over, and the guru turned to me and he said, "What do you want to do with your life?" In perfect English.
Wow.
And I thought, I want to sink underneath the floor here. I don't want to be on the spot here at all. I said, well, probably go back to, Austria one day and study at the university. My plan was to study philosophy and psychology. So the fields at that time of interest. And he said, universities are slaughterhouses of intelligence. I wasn't as advanced as you are today, so I didn't understand it quite away. I thought, oh, that's strong tobacco. But as the years go by, I understood more and more, our educational system is really a slaughterhouse. But the first thing in school that really I think that every kid should learn is how to grow your own food. Because if you can't grow your own food, you can't survive. You can, philosophize and this, whatever you want. You won't survive. You have to be able to grow your own food. So it is something that we cannot afford to be disconnected from. We can't afford it. We simply cannot. So yes, the battle is very uneven. You have a giant monster army that steamrolls everything and everyone. And then you have a few individuals who stand up and try to do something about it in the food industry, in agriculture. So it's not a matter of being a farmer, it's a matter of someone who wants to eat. And I think that's all of it. We all want to eat. And if you want to have something to eat, we have to do something about it. Otherwise, there will be no natural food. There's hardly, today, 70% of our food is genetically modified ingredients. And the list goes on and on. There are more than 3,000 chemicals in our food. Many of the chemicals that are authorized by